Global Eco-Village Network, GEN. Robert has also been active Swedish permaculture and transition organizations and all these community-led action networks, European umbrella, Ecolise. Originally from California, USA, Robert moved to Sweden during his studies in international relations and economics. He later completed a Master of Science degree in Environmental Engineering and Sustainable Infrastructure at the Royal Institute of Technology, Stockholm. Robert has worked for the Swedish government, United Nations, European Commission, and Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, mainly in international development cooperation, internationalization of education, and reinforcing democratic institutions. He has worked with regional development at the County Administrative Board and Region Gotland, and been an elected member of the Regional Council of Gotland. He was the first international secretary of Gotland University College, the precursors of today Uppsala University Campus Gotland. Currently, he observes elections internationally for the OSCE and EU, employed by Swedish State's Folk Bernadotte Academy. Roberto will speak about today about Relearn Suderbin and Relearn Pyrenees. And now, Roberto, thank you so much. And now the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Michaela. And I hope everyone can hear me very well.
Yeah.
Okay, I can see a little bit of people there. Yes, okay. Nice to see you, that there's some people here. Yeah, it's a real honor that I was asked by Michaela, so very big thanks for that, to speak to you today. Yes, as Michaela was explaining, I've worked quite a long time with both Gotland and with development and sustainable development. And I'm calling today from actually a mountain house up in the Pyrenees. I have no electricity in my room, but I have Wi-Fi, so it's working. And this is part of the work that we've been doing. The NGO Relearn Suderbin is something we created on Gotland, I think 2007, before we started the Eco Village. And just last year, we started something here in the Pyrenees called Relearn Pyrenees. And it's basically always working with education, very much sustainability education. And I would like to thinking outside the box. So you heard a little introduction to Suderbin. I don't know how many in the room. I can just test this interactivity possibility. Can you raise a hand if you've ever been out to the Eco Village 7 kilometers south of Visby? Anyone been there? One? I say 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. Okay, 5. Okay, a few of you have been there. It's very easy to visit. They're usually very friendly, welcoming. There's buses and bicycle paths to get there. And many of the master's courses on at the Campus Gotland have made visits to the Eco Village. Many people have even written their thesis somehow connected to the Eco Village. And we've had 2 people living there who have done the Master of Sustainable Management as well. So thousands of volunteers have passed through this Eco Village in the last 16 and a half years. Hundreds of people have had, or at least 100 people, have had annual scholarships from the EU or the French government to stay 1 year in the Eco Village and experience the 4 seasons, etc. So we try to give this a wider impression of sustainability, but also thinking more in a outside the box, in the bigger picture of how sustainability works. I'm going to be putting up a presentation now, which has basically 3 parts. The first part is a fly in a very much, there we see if that's working for you. There, I can see that's working. a big fly-in into this area. I think you really can't talk about sustainability unless you have a larger perspective, and then the issues make sense. It really gets difficult to understand sustainability if you're talking about just here and now. And that's why we want to start with this big, wider approach. The title of this talk is a little bit mysterious, but that's meant to be, and I think it will clarify during the presentation as it goes on. Let's go down here. Yeah, sustainability, Gotland in the bigger picture. I really want to go back a few years, back 2.5 million years actually, to see this Pleistocene epoch. It's this geological period which leads up to the Holocene, which many of us is what we know as the modern historical period. And then through this 10,000 years plus of this calm period of human development under the Holocene, we come into the Anthropocene. And that's why I wanted to put that Anthropocene in there to realize we're just in the beginning of something and how to adjust to it. I put also below here on the Gotland that we didn't get a human occupation on Gotland until the Holocene, and we're just leaving the Holocene now. So that's basically Gotland's part of the big picture, but we'll come back to that. I think besides the big picture, systems thinking is really important to understand how everything is interconnected and to also be based on empirical science. At the same time, be open for local indigenous knowledge, etc., which we will also come back to, even relating to Gotland, how that can actually play in. So if we look at the Pleistocene epoch, this is really the important period of human development. We say basically that the first humans, our cousins, not our same species, but our cousins in the same genus, evolved during this period. There was a lot of development. This is all happening in Africa for the majority of this period. We're talking about development of human evolution in Africa. I think it's interesting. I put fire mastery in the middle here. We don't know exactly. Maybe 1 million years ago, we talk about mastering fire, but it's quite interesting just to think about the fact that for the first 1.5 million years, humans didn't have fire. Okay, it was Africa, but they did also have ice ages, etc. And they also managed to find enough food without having the help of cooking with fire. You can say also during this period, we have a movement out of Africa and actually covering Asia and Europe from Africa. And this is in the later stages. We have 6 different species at one point of humans living in parallel. And we've actually, until very recent times, if we would talk recent times being maybe 30,000 years ago, we had parallel species with our own species, the Homo sapiens. We had other species living next to us until 30,000 years ago. And we know also we have interbreeding between these species because some of us have this Neanderthal DNA in us. Quite interesting to note also the Neanderthal having the larger brain than the Homo sapien, and that may be even relative. I mean, if living as a hunter-gatherer, you actually need to have a lot of storage of information about geographical locations, plant species, animal species, preparations, how to make tools, etc., which actually is very taxing and demands a lot of brain power. We would see towards the end of this, I mean, you have Homo erectus during a big part of the period. Homo erectus is the species that lives the longest. And then we get the Homo sapiens about 300,000 years ago. And then we have a cognitive revolution 70,000 years ago, where we start to think in abstract thinking. But we're not the only species that might have been able to do that. And then 40,000 years ago, I think something really important happens, is a large extinction of large mammals. and eventually the other human species also disappeared. So we leave this Pleistocene epoch with only one human species spread almost everywhere on the Earth. North America, South America come a little bit later, but the other parts of the world are inhabited by humans. Let's then go on to the next one. And then we're in the Holocene, and I won't take too long on this because the point is during this Holocene period, humans started settling in larger areas. They were developing agriculture, which becomes super important because agriculture's development is directly connected to the human population's explosion and expansion during this time. Gotland is just lifting out of the water at this point. We're submerged in this freshwater lake. What's interesting is Gutesagan tells us about, when the first humans come to Gotland, how there's a problem of Gotland disappearing under the sea. So this is the initial hunter-gatherers coming to Gotland are finding it a bunch of islands out there, not fully looking like it does today. And they were hunter-gatherers. They're both Western and Eastern hunter-gatherers that come to Sweden and then come to Gotland. And what's interesting is half of this period of the Holocene, while the rest of the world is developing agriculture coming from, you could say, the Middle East, there's actually no agriculture on Gotland. Gotlanders survive as hunter-gatherers up until the middle of this period, maybe 5,000 years ago. And then it's these migrations or influences from migrations, first from the Anatolian area, but then this Yumana expansion from the Ukraine steppe towards Western Europe that we get agriculture. And so agriculture develops on Gotland, and then we eventually come into the modern period after the Vikings, Christianity, nation states, and finally industrialization. That's just a small part of this. And let's get where we are today. This is the Anthropocene epoch. This has not been fully accepted. These are geological terms, and the International Geological Society has not completely accepted this. There's been several attempts by different working groups of geologists to get this through. It's becoming more accepted. The problem is with geological time is you have to be able to find evidence. And the evidence shown so far is radioactivity, microplastics, etc., that are found in sediments of a lake in Canada. Crawford Lake was given as the motivation, but they're still attempting to try to push through the acceptance of the next geological era called the Anthropocene. What's important here is the Anthropocene is a geological period affected by humans. And that's why I put the nuclear tests of the 4550 area as the start of this. But then I think most of you have heard of Rachel Carson, who had the book Silent Spring in 1962, and talks about that human-produced chemicals are going to radically affect our nature. A guy called Murray Bookchin, 6 months previous, had written something about our synthetic environment, also saying the same thing, that humans will be damaged by the chemicals humans are producing. And 10 years later, we have the first UN conference on environment held in Stockholm. And that actually starts the whole COP movement that we know today, with COP29 just finishing in Dubai. This all started in 1972 in Stockholm. And then we had sort of the pinnacle of this was the COP21 in Paris in 2015, where we agreed we have to radically change our ways or we're going to have problems. And we have a 10-year window, we said, in 2015. If you notice, we're getting into 2025. That 10-year window is now closing. And the question is, what has happened? And you'll see what I've put down here is the very beginning of this Anthropocene epoch is the Great Acceleration, which we'll get to in a minute, followed by the Great Simplification. I don't think you need to Google the Great Simplification. It's a word used by different people, but I like to use it to describe this latter half of the Anthropocene epoch. We go on to the next point, the Great Acceleration itself. Some of the things they've looked at are the huge socioeconomic trends, these hockey sticks of everything from production of water, energy, paper, tourism, population. Everything is just exploding as we get to this modern period, which takes off 1950, 1960, 1970, and just goes straight up. Similarly, we have the Earth system trends, which also produce the same sort of hockey stick with depletion of forests, loss of fisheries, acidification of oceans, the depletion of the ozone, which does stabilize, if you say, in any case, and then nitrogen oxide, CO2, etc. So we get these hockey sticks in this great acceleration in this period we're living in now. And just so as not to focus completely on climate, we're very thankful that a group of 30-some researchers under the Stockholm Resilience Center and Johan Rockström from Stockholm wrote a paper in 2009 about planetary boundaries, trying to establish international standards for what is safe operating space for us to work within. And when have we gone over that? In 2009, they had assessed, they assessed 7 different boundaries and found that 3 of them were crossed. They come back in 2015, 4 of them are crossed. And finally, 9 boundaries have been assessed and 6 of them are crossed. And what can be interesting here is that it's not CO2 that's the worst situation. We have the geochemical one with this is potassium nitrogen flows out for eutrophication. We have the biosphere integrity quadrant, which is about biodiversity loss and what that really means. And then we have also novel entities, all these chemicals, et cetera, that have been released into the environment that are considered even a worse situation than our climate one, which we know very well from the International Panel on Climate Change. So I wanted to focus a little bit on this picture. I don't know if you've seen this before, but this is the limits to growth research that was done in the very early 70s. It came out in 1972 at the same time as the first UN conference on the environment in Stockholm. And it was a sort of philanthropist organization trying to think of the greater good of the earth called the Club of Rome, which initiated this and got researchers together and had them stay at MIT. And MIT in the US is, at that time, was definitely the leader in computer technology. And they had computers, of course, the size of houses, which used punch cards, and I'm sure have less computing capacity than what your smartphones have today. But that's the best we had in 1972. And they were able to work out very sophisticated models. Their model was called World 3. And to try to put some real numbers in there from resource use, industrial output, population growth, and put that into a model and see what happens and try different scenarios. And the winning scenario was called Business as Usual 2. And Business as Usual 2 was actually, they had to expand the amount of resources because Business as Usual 1 was with resources running out much earlier, but they didn't think of the huge innovative capacities of humans to do deep sea oil drilling or oil shale oil extraction or Arctic drilling, etc. So we've been much more resourceful in finding resources. And as you hear, energy is a huge component there. That's oil, coal, our fossil fuels, but also other things like minerals, like wood, etc. So all these different resources are expected at some point. They are limited and they will go down. And the question is, what exactly happens? And what they found with the real data from the 70s was that food per capita and industrial output will peak at some point when resources get more scarce, even though population will continue to grow, and even though pollution will continue. And pollution in this sense means, of course, chemical pollution, but it also means CO2 and other greenhouse gases. And what you get there is a problematic period here where basically there is no expansion of the amount of food. Population is keep on rising, so that demands more food and there's less food per capita, and we get a problem. Okay. Why I spent a lot of time on this is that this model has been reviewed and reviewed, first initially by the authors themselves, but later on other scientists have gone in and used real data and checked these models, and they keep on coming up with very accurate predictions that somewhere in the early to mid 2000s, we have a problem. And maybe the best estimates now are talking about 2038, which hence the title of my talk here, is that in 2038, we should expect drastic things to happen. And things can happen in a way where you have a cascade of tipping effects, that one thing leads on to the other. So we don't know if we're talking about human systems or natural systems or the combination of the two. But we have serious issues right now that really question the sustainability of our current society. And at the bottom of this, I mention the Great Silence, which is George Thakradis has used this term, which I like, about the current period we're living in, because we knew in 2015 we had to do a lot to stop the polycrisis development that we see. At the same time, we get less and less talk about it. It becomes more and more uncomfortable, more increased denial of the fact that we have a huge problem. Okay, this is one picture, and the picture why I'm showing this picture is that it's not the same for everyone. Some people are already living in a collapse style situation, but other people are relatively unaffected. We are, for the most part, unaffected at the moment. And how we are affected in the future depends on exactly where we are. The planet is definitely going to survive. Life on the planet is going to survive, but not everyone is equally impacted. And just as you show in this picture, and what this guy Hancock wanted to show as well, in this was a drawing parallel to a podcast he was giving, that some people that are hunter-gatherers in areas which might not have drastic environmental changes are not going to notice so much, whereas urbanized people may notice what people in parts of the global south have already been contending with. If this makes some of you feel uncomfortable, that is perfectly normal. Logically, when you think about this, there's a lot of eco-anxiety, sadness, anger, etc. There's an organization called Deep Adaptation Forum that holds basically weekly meetings online for people to discuss and deal with their feelings, which is a very important part of the process. But for me, it's really important to just accept what science is telling us is happening. And that in itself will be empowering for you to actually go forward and do something about it. Okay, so we're in the what I'm calling the Great Simplification. It's the decomplexification of our life. It doesn't need to be a bad thing. It is big change for many of us, but yeah, we can't avoid it. What's been done cannot really be changed. There is going to be unstable climate. We had unstable climate in the Paleocene as well, that didn't allow them to do agriculture. It wasn't that agriculture wasn't understood or invented in the end of the Paleocene. It was that the climate was too unstable to allow agriculture. They would get crop failures, etc., because of droughts and rains, etc. This is coming back, where agriculture will be more and more difficult, and thus food will be more limited. At the same time, the less humans are able to do agriculture means a resurgence of nature, plants, wild animals on those croplands. It happens very fast. I've seen it myself on Gotland. We have a piece of a field out in Steenkumla that was regularly plowed. Now it's not plowed, and the trees coming up come extremely fast. Nature comes back, but maybe not with the same biodiversity it once had. We're talking about a lot of weather phenomena like droughts, heat waves, floods, sea level rise, and thus there will be a decrease in human and domestic animal population. And there may be migrations, we don't know, definitely a migration from urban areas to rural areas, but we don't know how much global migration will be possible in the future. And then increased dependence and reuse and repurposing of existing goods as manufacturing goods becomes very difficult. We have very limited trade, and production becomes much more localized. And I wanted to point, one of these researchers who had researched the MIT limits to growth theory, Ugo Bardi, has written after studying that also about something he calls the Seneca effect, which is the effect of how societies can fall apart very quickly. Even though it's hard to build up a society, it's very easy for societies to fall apart. That's the Seneca effect. But then he came out with a book in 2019 about the rebound, the Seneca rebound effect. The Seneca rebound is that a society can also rebuild unusually quickly because you have, for example, the social capital to organize. So that's what we don't really know exactly what it will look like. But I go to my next picture about what could this great simplification look like. And I have some scenarios here of garden cities, of market hamlets, of self-sufficient homestead villages, of nomadic uncivilization. And I think there's not like one homogeneous answer for how things will be, but the important is there'll be a diversity. There'll be a diversity very much dependent on our ability to control the important factors here of harnessing energy. We're talking about harvesting energy in this post-collapse world, which means, you know, what renewable energies will be available, what other type of energies will be available, what can we harvest. That really dictates how much concentration of humans you can have. The less energy you can harvest, the farther down the scale you have to be in dispersing the population. And the other aspect, of course, is food sourcing, that if you can develop things like extraction of food from biomass, if you can grow in like soil-free environments like aquaculture or aeroponics, etc., then you could possibly gather humans in a garden city. But if you can't, it's extreme disbursement of humans in what I refer to as nomadic uncivilization, as being sedentary and living in one place is a new thing. We haven't done that, you know, until maybe 10,000 years ago. So it's a new thing. We always followed the food before, and that may be something that comes back to us. I just want to go to a few last slides. Is strategic backcasting. This is a general concept used in many different locations, but applications in different parts of science. But I think it's really helpful if one is considering what one should be doing today to have the future one wants to have, is to look, where do you want to be? What situation do I want to be in? And how do I get those attributes, or I am in that location, etc., to make what I want to do possible. And this could be developing your personal attributes to be agile, resilient, having the practical skills, the physical fitness, but it can also be a lot about mental and psychological preparedness to be able to know how you're going to handle these situations, but also what location are you going to be in? Let's look at what is the predictions of temperature, water, accessibility, etc. Look in the futures, where do you want to be? And finally, who do you want to be with? It's always easier and safer to be in community, to have people around you that you think you can work with and trust and develop something. And finally, I just want to mention a PhD thesis I ran across, which was looking into the work of Joanna Macy. I hope some of you have heard of Joanna Macy. She's been working since the 70s with something called the work that reconnects. And she's been developing different ideas, which have been very supportive. She's 95 today, so still alive, hanging around. And she was very important for sort of guiding a lot of the green movement in the 70s and 80s and 90s forward. And some of her ideas was this, that what should we be doing? This time period at that, back in the 70s and 80s, was called the Great Turning. They knew then that something had to change, but they thought it was a softer turn that I think that what we're going to experience. But she talked about holding actions to protect the natural resources and living ecosystem environments we have, building new structures to live in a more harmonious way with the Earth systems, and then shifting our consciousness. And there was a man just a couple of years ago, this Michael Lynn Wellman, who wrote his PhD thesis on this, sort of rephrasing what Joanna Macy had talked about into reskilling, remembering, and resistance of not trying to protect what we can protect, reskilling yourself for the future, but remembering what we once knew. And that's back to this thinking back that humans have lived in much different conditions before and done well. And that remembering a lot, especially from our indigenous people who still have a lot of that knowledge of how to live and how to relate to the rest of the living world. He found also is this interesting intersection of those three circles: rewilding yourself, and rewilding what nature, what we can return back to nature from human occupation. So that's what I wanted to say today. I think we have a few minutes left before your lunch. If you would like to ask any questions, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know either how it works with a microphone, but if you have any hand in the air, and we'll figure this out.
Yeah, sure.
So what's your view on this sort of coming doom, so to speak? Can we actually survive this, or do you think essentially humanity is going to go off a cliff? And in that case, when will that happen?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was trying to say, that researchers are telling us it looks like, and they keep on checking these numbers, that something around 2040, and that's why I put 2038 is sometime in here. So we're talking about in 13 years. This, of course, there is no one who can know. There's no one can know how this will happen or when it will happen. So it could be 26 years, and it can be in 1 year. So that's the type of preparation. But think that you need a certain period to prepare yourself. And that's the reason why I'm speaking today, is that prepare yourselves. You're studying a master in sustainable management, and that this is the most sustainable management you can think about. What do you start to do today to prepare for that world which is coming? There's very little point in preparing for the world that just exists today, because that's a very short notion, I think. And this is what the science is telling us, is prepare for that future. And I think, yes, humans are extremely resourceful and diverse. That's one of our problems. We're we're more ingenious than we are ethical, and that's our main weakness. So it is definitely possible. I'm sure humans will survive, but the society won't look like it looks today, and there will be drastic changes, unfortunately. But we have to also get into some balance. You realize that of terrestrial mammals, biomass, 96% of the biomass is either humans or domesticated animals. Only 4% of terrestrial mammal biomass is in wild animals. That's how skewed it's become, and it will actually balance back. But it's a difficult process, and it's something that you need to have at least 10 years to prepare yourself for.
So, do you believe we already reached the tipping point, or the point of no return?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, you can say the climate effects today. We've had heat records every year for the past few years. We have oceanic surface temperatures that we've never seen before. We've seen things in Antarctica now, and Western Antarctica, which are really afraid of something big could happen much faster than researchers have thought. So we are hitting a lot of these natural tipping points. The complexity in society, you can say also on human systems, international trade. If you read the newspaper, it's not that we're getting to a more cohesive world. The world system on the human side is also breaking down. So this is the trends. This is where we're going. And rather than to have any anxiety about that, it's rather to accept that and figure out, what does this mean for me? How do I plan for that future, which all the signals and all the trends are pointing towards? And that's why I wouldn't like to frame it as doom. I would like to as a transformational opportunity if you take it.
I have one more thing, actually. Go ahead.
I suppose you have thoughts about the economic growth and its importance in this. How do you see the political process, or can it be altered to downcycling and degrowth?
Yeah, I mean, everything we can do, we should do. Everything we can in the way of degrowth, etc., we should do. I mean, everything about your personal vulnerability, your community, your city, your country's vulnerability should be looked at right now to make yourself more prepared for the future that's coming. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to I mean, the reality is it's very hard to stop the economical machine that we have started. It is very hard for politicians, and I've been a politician many years. The political system can't handle this. This is too big for our political system to handle. So that's why I don't think one should wait for politicians or corporations to come with the answers. I think you have to just take initiatives yourselves. And you can say what I was saying before about the extreme weather we're seeing today is the result of emissions 30 years ago. So we have the last 30 years of increased emissions that are going to give us tomorrow's climate. So that it's some things are inevitable. You can't get out of them. Everything is, I mean, I should say it's highly likely is what I'm talking about. This is all very highly likely, but all the science is pointing in that direction. And it's really not fair to deny and do nothing when you are very lucky to be so well educated and well resourced to be able to choose which destiny you want to have.
Okay, final question then. I was curious what you think of some of the critics of this message. I'm not sure if you're familiar with a guy called Björn Lomborg. False alarm in the US. You have people like Elon Musk, who's essentially saying that it's a false alarm, we'll be fine, do you think they have kind of a valuable perspective? Are they lying? Are they misguided? How do you feel about those messages?
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, definitely, I think they're lying. I mean, we know that Exxon knew about the climate change that their oil production would cause, and they hid the science they knew about. So this is built into the system. If you have vested interest in the current system, you will say that. I'm even afraid that, for example, scientists in the IPCC are not being totally honest, that the things are dire, and they keep on saying, well, we still have a window. We still have a window. There still can be changes. We said 10 years ago in Paris, we had a 10-year window to turn things around, and we did very little, very little. It's really hard to see. And now you see increasing denialism in the Swedish parliament, in parliaments all over the world, in the White House, etc. So I don't think the political system can actually handle what's coming. And that's why I think you need to look at what science is telling us, but also you have to use your own head to decide, what do I do about this situation?
So thank you so much, Robert Hall, and
Okay, thank you very much, Michele, and thank you for inviting me.
have a beautiful day. I would just to say that you had the capacity to summarize a lot of concepts that we have studied in these 4 months and leave us with a beautiful message that we need to believe in what we're doing, because sometimes we feel a bit lost. So we need this encouragement. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Good luck.